Hey everyone, Ace Maven here, coming at you with a Vox Machina tutorial video. And today I'm going to talk about fixed mounts. So there are a few grinders here that have fixed mounts. One is the overhaul, the others are the dredge and the catalyst. And fixed mounts means that there are these weapon mounts that are built into the grinder, and they do not change direction with your scope. So if you're looking at something with your reticle in the game, they will not follow your reticle. So for example, the catalyst has a fixed mount, which is there built into the chest, but it also has the the movable mounts where if built into like the arms, where if you're looking with your scope, your arm, for example, will point in that direction and shoot right at your target, but obviously the fixed mounts, it stays where it is. So you'll see that these three grinders have the fixed mounts in different places. So on the dredge, the fixed mount is sort of built in as like an arm. So it's kind of, over here with respect to where you are in the cockpit. On the catalyst, you saw that it's built into like the chest cavity there, and you're kind of sitting on top. So it's sort of shooting out from like your chest area. And then on the overhaul, these things, there's your cockpit. So they're pretty far off to the side and then up. So they're sort of shooting from here. Those are some important things to keep in mind when you're operating them, because they'll be coming out from sort of these different directions. So I'm going to go ahead and hop into a dredge here and start out with this loadout. So basically I have missiles. I'll start out with the missiles as the fixed mount, but I'll show you what the options are here. And so for the fixed mount options, you have the missiles, the missile pack, the hammer, which is like a guided missile, and a Skyjacker, which is like an anti-aircraft missile, if you will. So we're going to start with the regular missiles and just give a quick demonstration of these. And a few things to keep in mind for each of the different grinders that have a fixed mount and how you want to like account for them. So with the missiles, you have 8 of these missiles, and they'll recharge pretty quickly. But again, you have to kind of keep in mind like where they're shooting from. So in this case, they're shooting out from that arm mount on the side. So you'll see that's where my arm is. And with missiles, as it said, they fly apart after a certain range. So if I'm shooting, you see they'll travel, and then if you can see, they start to spread out after a range. So if I'm shooting, I'll bring my sight down. If I'm shooting at that guy like far away, over 2,000 meters, I shoot my missiles, see if any of them hit. None of them actually hit the target. I would know that if there was a little X on my reticle that appeared. So you see that there are 1 or 2 of them actually hit the target. So you see after a certain range, the missiles will spread apart. So that's one thing to keep in mind. The other thing to keep in mind with missile packs is that, again, since it's a fixed mount, which means it's fixed in its direction, it's not going to change. Like if I'm shooting at this person and they're way over there and I'm looking this way, my missiles are going to fire straight first and then have to turn. So if I were like here, it's not too bad, but it could be hard to sort of account for those directional changes, So if you're firing over there, that's not too bad. Sometimes the distance that they're away will make a big difference in terms of in terms of having to account for that part. Okay, especially if you're kind of shooting up in the air or downward, that can make a big difference. So those are the missiles, just keeping in mind, like, so it's especially kind of important, I guess, if you're like sort of closer range, maybe. Not sure if I turn on fast fuel here. But if if you're like closer range and you're trying to shoot, it could be much more, you know, challenging to account for. You see, they don't quite turn in the speed you might want them to, right? So they're not turning fast enough to actually hit that target because it's too close. But see, these are my top-mounted missiles. They will turn and shoot right at the target. But whereas the fixed mount obviously remains fixed. So you see, if a target's really close and you're trying to shoot it from the side, your missiles may not turn in time to actually hit your target, and you could be in trouble, okay? So that's one of the things to keep in mind with the missile mount. And again, for each of these 3 grinders, they shoot from a different location from the grinder, and so you have to sort of account for where that is in terms of, again, that arc up and down and left and right. So I'm going to switch to the catalyst just because it's a little bit more maneuverable, and I will demonstrate the Skyjacker. So the Skyjacker is an anti-air missile, and just give me a second, and I'm going to modify my game here just a little bit, give me something a little bit more to shoot at. I'm going to bump up the max players. Hopefully that'll get some folks flying around. Good, go away. So you'll see with the Skyjacker, it shoots out, and then you see those like spikes extend from it. Those are the proximity detonators. So your target has to be within the proximity of those spikes for it to explode. And you see that there is a slight delay. So if you're shooting something really close range and those little spikes have not extended yet, the Skyjacker won't explode. It'll just, you know, fly right past them, or it'll just impact them, and when it impacts them, it does, you know, almost no damage. So you need to make sure that they're within that range. And as it says it detonates with fast-moving targets. So a target has to actually be moving at a certain speed for Skyjacker to explode. So it's not going to explode on something that's just walking around. And if your enemy is hovering or moving very slowly, you see that one's just moving really slowly, it's also not going to detonate. So they have to be moving at a certain speed. Like I said, it won't detonate on your own team. So if you're shooting at targets and there's an enemy target, it will not. If there's an enemy target behind your team, but your team's in front of it, like see there's Robbie, it's not going to detonate on Robbie, it only detonates on the enemy team. There was one example where there was a flying grinder and it did explode. I'm not sure, I'm not going to give it too many chances because the bots aren't always flying around very much. But there's one exploded on that. But now you see it standing still, and of course it's not going to explode. Let's see if we can get 1 or 2 more examples here before turning this out. Okay, looks like he's ready to run. Go, run, go. What about that? Are you moving fast enough? No. Curious. So that's... Oh. Anyone? There we go. Boom. Short one, but should explode. So they have to be moving a certain speed, and they have to be at that certain range. Let's see if this, sometimes the go rush will take off. No. Alright, well, we're not going to worry about that too much. Yeah, the Skyjacker actually can also be used to detonate hammers, those missiles that are flying high. Especially when they're moving more slowly. Once those missiles commit, they could be hard to blow out of the sky with a Skyjacker. So that's a Skyjacker. Again, the things have to be moving at a certain speed, and they have to be kind of a distance away before the Skyjacker is active. So I'm going to bring up the hammer now. But it could be very effective, especially if you've got a lot of flyers on the other team flying around. It could really rain on their parade and kind of, you know, ground them in terms of flying around too much. All right, so the hammer is a guided missile. So the other missiles, they will follow your reticle, but that's it. If the target moves or something, you know, they're not going to chase after it. The hammer is a guided missile. It's pretty powerful, but you can guide it. So if you watch my startup video, you saw that when you bring down your scope, make sure you have it set to gaze, and you can set your gaze tracking to 5% speed, and that gives you a lot of good control on your gaze. When you fire the hammer, if you have your scope down, you see this is my view from here, right, from my grinder. But when you fire the hammer, it'll change to the view from the missile itself. So you can fire a hammer just right now, but it really helps to have that scope down. So I'm gonna show it with that first. So I'm gonna bring down my scope, and then when you fire the hammer, what you want to make sure you do is you hold down the trigger. And if you hold down the trigger, then if you move your gaze, your reticle, the hammer will also move. So let me show you this actually before I show you with the scope. So I'm going to fire a hammer here. I'm going to hold down my trigger, and you see when I let go of my trigger, the hammer will commit. You'll hear a boom, and it'll go like supersonic, but it'll just travel in a straight line. I have no more control over it. But I'm going to hold down my trigger. I'm going to shoot it. Now you see I'm going to turn my head this way, turn my head that way, turn my head up, turn my head down. Now I'm going to let go, and it goes shooting into the ground, okay? And you see now I have to wait for it to recharge. So that's the idea, so that what you can do is kind of track your targets. Hopefully there's a good target here I can get an eyeball on. We'll try that one. And I'm gonna shoot my hammer, and it's heading over there. You have 20 seconds. After this time runs out, you're kind of out of luck. It'll just like disappear. It'll vanish. So you want to kind of, you know, make sure you're on a target that you can hit in that time. I'm going to aim for center mass, and I'm going to guide it almost all the way there in this case, and let go real quick. And you see there I hit my target. I'm sure it did pretty significant damage. Looks like it was kind of a shoulder shot, but that thing's probably not feeling too good right about now. Another thing you can do is kind of aim for the ground. So there is like an explosive radius here. And what that allows you to do is actually shoot from a little bit more of a distance, like to commit it. That was pretty good. I almost destroyed both of them. That would have been great. But you see that I aimed more for the ground. And what that does is, you know, it allows you to sort of, you know, when it goes shooting forward, if something's really far away, or you're having trouble guiding it, or you want to commit before they blow it out of the sky, because they can shoot a hammer out of the sky. You can let go of it and more aim for the ground and still do a pretty good amount of damage. Sometimes center mass is a little harder to hit as well. So it can, even though you might think it's sort of trained on them, I'm going to let this one go. That one hit pretty well because it was pretty close, but sometimes center mass, if you're aiming for the body, it can fly right past. It's just a little tip that you can aim for the ground as well. The other little tip, now everybody's getting pretty close here. Now, of course, if this were like a real game with real players, a lot of that team would already be right on top of me. You can't be standing that close and expect to go unscathed in a real game, but bots don't care as much. But another little trick here is if you're shooting a Skyjacker and you're just a hammer, and you're just aiming right for your target, it's very easy for them to see it coming and to shoot it down. So one little trick that folks have been using is to shoot it up in the sky first. For example, shoot it sort of up in the sky, give it some height, and then start bringing it down on your enemy like that. And you have it come in more from you know, the sky area instead of the ooh. That looked pretty brutal. You have it come in more from the sky than just sort of straight on. Of course, you can also do like snaking around. I could shoot it, you know, off in that direction. come this way and then turn it and come from, a side, for example. And there's an example where it's just sort of flew right past. So that's the hammer. Again, you hold it down and it'll track and move at a slower speed, and when you let go of the trigger, it'll commit and go supersonic. So those are the 3 fixed mounts. They're fixed because they don't move with your reticle, with your sight, so they're fixed in place. But yeah, that's the overview. If you have any questions, please definitely feel free to leave them in the comments below. It's Ace Maven signing off, and I will see you in Vox.